And he joins us now on the Score Hotline, brought to you by Aturo, your all-weather tire, Aturo.com. Big Zay!
Morning, Brad.
Morning, boys. What's going on?
Well, are you in Indy or are you heading there? What's your plan?
Oh, I'll get there at some point today.
Today's the day,
It
right?
starts when you get there.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, well, I'll get down there today. I talked to Dave about Dave's got some connections with the Indiana State Police, and we're gonna open up.
Got you covered.
We're gonna open up things on 65 South a little bit.
We got you covered. Yeah, got a clear pathway.
Biggs is moving.
To get down there in time. So, Brad, when you get down there and you start talking to people, I think one of the questions, when you get really into what the Bears roster looks like now that they made the moves on Friday, Gerald Everett and DeMarcus Walker were cut for saving as much as $10.75 million. Is there another move that they're preparing for? Is it a defensive line move? What can you tell us about what they might have in store?
Well, I don't know that they're going to be cutting any more guys anytime real soon. I don't see another move to free up a bunch of cap space. And these were, like, people talk about, oh, these guys are cap casualties. Yeah, you create some more cap space. I don't know that you were getting what you were paying for either one of them. Right, and it's not like they had to have the cap space that these guys provided because they were in an advantageous cap situation when last Friday started, and when the day ended, those guys were cut and did provide them some more room. I got some people nearly aghast that they would consider releasing DeMarcus Walker because of their depth situation on the line. And I'm like, if the guy's not worth your $7 million a year contract, why are you keeping him? How's he making you better? Grand total of 7 sacks over the last 2 seasons. Listen, he answered the bell. He was out there every Sunday, 17 games each of the past 2 seasons, but he's not a difference maker. They overpaid him when he arrived, and they've got to get better. Like, keeping him as some rotational piece doesn't make you a better football team. They need to find some help on the defensive line. There's no question about that. I've heard people talk about Khalil Mack, and that one doesn't add up to me, guys. He just turned 34, I think, on Friday. Probably a heck of a celebration. Coming off a 6-sack season for the Chargers. I would think that he could do better this coming season, that he's got a little more gas left in the tank. But if they go out and sign a 34-year-old edge rusher in free agency, to me that's the equivalent of that's like the defensive version of Keenan Allen. Now, they traded for Keenan Allen this past year, but like, what are you doing?
I'm curious, Brad. Okay, $10.75 million. That could be a significant contribution, right? I mean, you look at the amount of cap. They didn't need the money, is my point. So you're absolutely right. They're looking at production versus what. But Walker is a guy who they had playing inside on occasion, outside, whatever. That seems like, and I'm not overselling him, but that just seems like a position where you have to have someone. And there are some big names out there, right? And you think they're clearing money to sign someone, right? Am I wrong about that?
Well, I think they had enough money to sign pretty much whoever they want before these moves.
Right.
Depending on how it's structured. I don't want to minimize what they've got to get done on that defensive line, both in terms of on the interior and at the edge. But guys, let's not get too far away from the offensive line store, which is where they need to be shopping come March 12th when free agency opens. That's like when when the offensive line store opens at 3:00 on March 12th, that Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson, they need to be walking in the front door there.
Oh yeah, they're going to be gate crashers. They're going to be door busters. They're going to be like those people on Black Friday morning when they run into Walmart.
They'll be sleeping overnight.
Right. Yes, they will be.
There's no e-commerce. They need to show up in person at the offensive line.
Good morning, Trey. How are you? Here's a $25 million check. All right, Brad. So looking big picture at the Bears front office as you speak of them, how awkward, or is it overstating it from the outside, will it be for them to work Ian Cunningham back into the mix, the hierarchy? Where does he sit at these meetings? Ben Johnson is right next to Ryan Poles in philosophical lockstep. Where does that leave Ian Cunningham now that he did not get the Jaguars general manager job?
Well, I think Ian Cunningham got an extension last offseason. I believe that's the case. So I'd expect him to be in the mix. I think maybe he wasn't involved in everything in terms of interviews for the head coaching candidates earlier in the offseason, and then perhaps in some of their personnel meetings just because they would want to avoid any type of conflict of interest or things of that nature. But, I mean, he's been a trusted guy for Ryan Poles since day one, and a guy who's risen up certainly is Jeff King, and that's why I think King was the obvious replacement for Ian if Ian had gotten the job in Jacksonville, or remember he had 2 interviews with the Titans earlier this offseason, didn't get that spot either. So I thought King would have been the new assistant GM, but Ian and Ryan have worked very closely since they arrived back in 2022.
Has Cunningham's star faded because the Bears haven't made a move, because they lost 10 in a row, because the greatest trade ever kind of faded a little bit, and the guy they passed on became the best defensive tackle in the NFL? I mean, did he have a job in Arizona that he didn't want? Like, he had an opportunity.
Yeah, turned down the Cardinals' job.
See, that happens, though. Guys have their run. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden they're not as hot a candidate.
Right, and how do you sell that to your fan base? And I'm just asking the question, like, our new GM came from the Bears. Okay, what do you do with the Bears? Well, you start and you look at the win total, right? You look at the playoffs and you look at things of that nature, and there's got to be a level of that that's a tough sell. Like, Tony Baselli's running the interviews in Jacksonville, right? Okay. Tony Baselli's the guy they pictured with their finalist candidates walking through the atrium of their building or wherever it was in the building. But you see, Tony Baselli and the guy he's going to interview with. What Tony Baselli make a living doing? Protecting the quarterback. Like, I would imagine Baselli asked Ian at some point, hey, what happened with the offensive line in Chicago? Like, I would think
so true.
An offensive line, I would think that would be near the forefront of Tony Baselli's mind. I have no idea. Maybe it didn't come up at all, but you've got some explaining to do there as well if that comes up. So if the Bears can get this thing going, and I'm not talking about necessarily this year, but turn this thing around, then they'll have people working there that will be attractive to other clubs. There's no question about it.
3 picks in the top 41. This is Prospect Week down in Indy, the Underwear Olympics, as Dustin likes to call it. Is it trite to ask or to wonder what the Bears are looking for specifically? Are you expecting somebody to emerge that maybe is a sleeper? What are you looking for if you are following the Bears' habits this week?
I think you're looking at you're looking at guys that they could build with, like guys that are going to be, they got to pass a character test. I think they got to be guys you want in your room. If Ben Johnson's going to have an influence on Ryan Poles, look at the type of individuals they brought in Detroit. And Ben Johnson's his own guy, and he's not going to try to replicate what Dan Campbell's done. And he's not going to say, well, Brad Holmes did it this way. But I think you're looking for a type of player, and then I think you got to look at a combination of positions that are going to fill needs, and you can't draft for need. It does play a role in things. If you're naive and think that it doesn't happen, you're kidding yourself. When teams say, "Oh no, we never do that," they're lying to you as well.
Yeah.
Right, but it's that puzzle that you're putting together through free agency and the draft. So when you talk about those 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, I'm looking again at the offensive line store. I'm looking at the defensive line, and then maybe you're considering a running back in there, or is there some other piece to the puzzle where you think there's a special player? And I just don't see him going for a tight end there right now. But that's a position that I'm intrigued about because I think it's a good one for this draft, and they're going to need to pair somebody up with Cole Kmet, and it's not real strong for the tight end position in free agency. And what are they looking for? Do you want a blocker? Do you want a receiver? Do you want a hybrid? I mean, in the perfect world, you get a great hybrid, right? Our guy can do everything. I don't know that they're in a perfect world tight end shopping, but it's early in the process.
See, that to me is the most fascinating element of a new coach, a new defensive coordinator. What are they looking for in terms of a player profile? Have they sat down with the scouts and told them, hey, we don't need a 3 technique, not in our system. We're looking for more girth. And I don't know the answer to that, Brad. I don't know if they are changing what they're looking for as opposed to what they had a year ago.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I know that through the end of last week, they were involved in personnel meetings. So I think that's reviewing what you have on the roster, that's talking about it, that's talking about fits, and they've got a couple more weeks here before free agency. So I think you're talking about meeting with the coordinators who have spent time with the position coaches, because you're right. You're getting a general profile of, hey, what are we looking for athletically from this position? Like what's the ideal? And you want to learn that, and then you want to try to make that happen. And that's why you look at some of these places that have had the same coach, the same GM, the same scouts forever, and they just seem to replenish what they need. Like look at how the Baltimore Ravens have done things for the longest time, and that's because their college scouts in the Southeast or in the West or wherever, they know what that outside linebacker looks like in the coach's eyes and in the GM's eyes, and what it looks like on the field for them in Baltimore. And they know what the safety looks like, and they just keep supplying players because of they've got good people, they've got a deep understanding, and that takes time to develop. You're not going to get that here this year or next year. It's not going to happen 3 years from now. I mean, to get to where they are, you got to be going at it for a while. But that's an important step and something they're all going to have to kind of learn and understand together.
All right, Brad. So the entire league gathers in Indianapolis beginning today for a week. It's the NFL convention. And so this quarterback store that you know so well has some new inventory. Matthew Stafford has been given permission by the Rams to seek his market value to figure out what it would be in terms of a trade. That could be just an interesting story, or it could be a story that affects the Bears in that division. You wonder what's going to be ahead for the Vikings and Sam Darnold. There was some chatter about the Vikings and Matthew Stafford during the season. What do you think is going to happen with Matthew Stafford, and could he in fact end up in Minnesota?
Boy, that I don't think he'd end up in Minnesota. No, and it's wild to me that the Rams, when you consider how close the Rams were to springing the upset in Philadelphia, right? Like that was a situation where you could have had the Rams in the NFC Championship game there, right? But McVay's a pretty sharp guy, and I don't know that Les Snead, the general manager in LA, gets the credit he really deserves. He's done a really good job for a long time. Now maybe he needs to get back and win another Super Bowl to be talked about as much as a guy like Howie Roseman. But so you kind of defer to them, like, well, if they're doing this, maybe it is the right move. Like you got to consider that. But
what's that like to give the guy the benefit of the doubt? What does that feel like in a football town?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what it feels like is you've got experience watching the team play in the postseason a good deal, and you've got experience watching them kind of zig when others zag, and oh, well, they were right. Yeah, it did work. And I don't know what it feels like on a regular basis, but certainly Les Snead and Sean McVay have earned that right in Los Angeles and with those who follow the Rams.
All right, so we know the O-line store is where you got to go. We know they need defensive line help. Let's go through it a little bit. You mentioned the tight end. You got to get some depth at that position. Running back seems like it needs an upgrade, right? And there's a ton of good running backs in this draft. I'm not suggesting that they go for these positions early, but they need help at safety. I mean, when you actually stop and look at the number of players they need, as good as it is to have, 3 picks in the top 41, boy, they really could use about 6.
Yeah, but I think they're in a good spot. In some of these positions we're talking about, there's going to be talent there later on. Like if they get a running back in round 2, I'm saying if they do that, they're getting a guy that they think can be an absolute workhorse, right? A guy who is going to be a real difference maker for them. Because I believe they could wait until round 3 or round 4 and get a back that they're going to plug in and have a lot of success with. But yeah, running back, tight end, offensive line, certainly the defensive line. Listen, you can never get too far away from that cornerback position.
Yes.
It's not a bad idea to bring in one of those and has
the corner position changed too in terms of the player you're looking for with a new defensive coordinator?
Could be. I think their hope right now, guys, is that Al Harris is the perfect guy to kind of communicate and break through with Tyreek Stevenson to help kind of unlock more of his potential. But you simply cannot have. There's no such thing as having too many cornerbacks. So there's a lot of ways they can go here, but let's not overcomplicate it. Like, this should be a meat and potatoes off season for Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson.